Welcome back to the CivilNet Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Elliott. I'm delighted to be joined today by a friend of the show and a repeat guest, Hovsep Patvakanyan, who is the head of the Investment Council of Armenia. Hovsep, thanks for joining today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so we got a lot of ground to cover. So I want to start with stuff on the manufacturing side of things. We're seeing a very interesting breakthrough. We're seeing some new regulations and some changes in the industry. Can you give us an overview of what's going on?
Sure. In the past 2.5 years, Investment Council of Armenia has been working actively with the government of Armenia to develop different assistance packages targeted at the manufacturing sector boost in Armenia. Some of them refer to the modernization of the equipment, which leads to the higher productivity. Others lead to inclusion of highly skilled workers in Armenia from abroad. And the other one refers to inclusion of people who haven't been involved in the sector and needs to enter the sector through the on-job training format. So for the first one, it's called Economy Modernization Program. It basically allows for the manufacturing companies through the commercial banks in Armenia to receive loans, subsidized loans from the government. And basically, the interest rate for those loans will be from 0 to 2% versus the general 14-16%. And these loans can be targeted at modernizing the equipment in Armenia by the different factories. So we've seen how this has led to the huge increase into the investment into the equipment and modernization of the factories. To give you some numbers, around 2,800 companies utilize this scheme and have invested over $800 million in purchasing of the equipment.
Are these locals or subsidiaries of international companies?
No, these are mostly local companies.
We have 2,800 manufacturing companies.
Yes, we have actually 5,500 overall.
Wow.
And out of those, around half of those have utilized the scheme, which is a very good sign. Yeah. In terms of also increasing the productivity of our companies and making them more competitive in the international arena. The second one is for the highly qualified skill force to enter Armenia. We've realized that a lot of manufacturing companies, and not only manufacturing companies, also hardware, tech companies, they experience the lack of talent, and they need to have this talent and expertise embedded in their daily operations from abroad. So the highly qualified specialist assistance program basically says if you have that kind of specialist embedded in your activities for 3 years, the government will subsidize you for 3 years from 20 to 50% of their salary. So in case you find someone from diaspora who comes to work in Armenia and corresponds to this criteria of highly qualified specialist, the government will pay up to half of their salaries to the business to keep those people in Armenia for.
Do we know how many people? Sorry to cut you off, but do we have a number of how many people, how many diasporans or even foreigners have taken up this offer?
We have at the moment within 1.5 years around 400 people are in Armenia through this program. Yeah. And they're dispersed across IT sector, across the manufacturing sector, but also we have some people who are all in the educational sector. They are teaching at the university. So obviously we try to make sure that more people know about the program and more people are engaged. We've been working with the Diaspora Commissioner's Office and the Repat Armenia to make sure that more people from diaspora know about this program. So, because in many cases when they move to Armenia, one of the impediments is that the salaries here are not compatible with their expectations, and given the rental prices right now, this can be a very good boost in their expectations as well.
They're starting to go down. I mean, we'll definitely touch up on construction, but you're seeing, when we started to look for a house a year and a half ago compared to now, there's an average of $100,000 less. You're seeing like much more affordable, and then the rent is also starting to catch up, because I think that people realize that the Russians are not staying long term. They're not buying property, and they're not. At least not in significant numbers. So I suspect by next year it'll have kind of corrected a little bit, because now we have European capital prices here.
Let's see. And the third assistance program is for the manufacturing sector companies who implement on-job training format to attract students, to attract people who haven't been involved in the sector. And it basically says that if you take this type of people who haven't been in the sector at all, and they are not skilled enough, and you train them for 12 months and you register them as workers, the government will pay you back the personal income tax of those workers for all the work that you do, all the training that you do for them. There is a fourth issue that we touched upon, and that is fully adopted right now by the Parliament of Armenia, that refers to the relations between the retail chains in Armenia and the manufacturing businesses, producers in Armenia. For a long time, we've had a problem that mostly the small producers haven't been paid by the retail chains in time.
Yeah.
And it would take 8 months, 9 months in many cases to give them back what they supplied for.
Wow.
And
for a small business, that's terrible.
Exactly. Yeah. We always speak about the SME access to finance and how interest rates, but imagine a situation when you're a small company and basically the only way for you to get your cash flow intact is to supply your products to the supermarkets, to the retail chains. And if you get your cash back in 8 months, in 7 months, this can be a very terrible situation for your very basic cash flow.
It's very disruptive.
So right now, it is enshrined in law that the payment should be done within 30 days after the invoice issuance for the foodstuff and 60 days for the non-foodstuff. The same goes for the agricultural produce. Many bigger agro-processing companies like cognac, wine-producing companies, they were collecting the grapes from the smaller farms, and the payment would be within 1 year, 1.5 years. And obviously, when you're a small farmer, this is not the way to go for you to expand or to, to forecast your cash flows. So this is already also changed for the 30 days once the invoice is issued.
But when did this change take place?
This was put in force from May 6th. The last one.
So it's still too early to tell what sort of impact that's had on the
yes,
market.
what we're gonna do within 1 month, we've developed a survey, and we'll be speaking to the businesses, because through the Investment Council we have now reached to around 7,000 businesses. Wow. And we'll be speaking to the businesses through the formal survey as well, to present it further to the Deputy Prime Minister's office as the monitoring results of the reform.
Which Deputy Prime Minister?
Tigran Khachaturian.
Gotcha. Tell me, what are some of the main manufacturing sectors that Armenia specializes in? Because that's interesting to me. I know that we do wines, but other than wine, cognac, and delicious jams and honey, what's Armenia like competitive at?
Agro-processing industry, as you mentioned, is on the first place.
Yeah.
We then follow with the we have very nice development in the pharma market. We have several big producers of pharmaceuticals that have entered also to the markets of Moldova, Central Asia. So mostly they are now presented here in Armenia, but they present a very big chunk in other markets. For you to understand the altitude, for Kyrgyzstan or Uzbekistan, for their whole market, the Armenia produced medications cover around 15% of the whole market.
Wow.
And when you look at some of the nice examples like Azad Pharmaceuticals or Liquor or RPMed, those are all very big companies that also invest a lot in their R&D in development of new medications. We've recently been speaking with Liquor, and they were telling us that they are now considering the entrance also to the Gulf countries, to United Arab Emirates, to Saudi Arabia, which are very hard markets to get when it comes to certification, licensing, and entrance requirements. But the fact that they've already established this nice routes towards the other markets gives them kind of leverage to think of bigger markets with higher value. The third area, I would say, again, for the past several years, the diamonds and the diamonds refinery and the jewelries in general.
Processing.
again, Armenia, as we talked last time as well, Armenia has a chance in terms of competitive advantage only on those products that are small in size and high in value because of the transportation costs. So those are generally the areas we succeed in. There was a very interesting finding that we've come across the other day. We're trying to assess to what level different assistance programs in the agriculture has impacted the change in the agricultural sector in terms of switch from the low value added products to high value added products. And what we see in the past 4 years, we went from 0 to around 20 millions of export when it comes to almonds, pistachio, things that haven't been really produced in Armenia at all. Or within 4 years, we've went from 0 for figs exports to around $12 million export for figs.
Wow. Where do we export all that to?
We export mainly in Russia, but when it comes to, for example, we've looked at the market of strawberries and berries. We've also entered quite quickly to the Gulf countries. Armenian strawberries are now presented both in Saudi Arabia and in United Arab Emirates retail chains. So one issue that we currently face is for their expansion to be in place, we need a better logistics and better transportation routes, because at the moment the capacity for strawberries to enter to the United Arab Emirates, for example, is only 4 tons per week. Whereas the demand for it, and that's what the producers tell us, they receive the demand of around 15, 16 tons per week, but they can't find the cargos for that.
Let's switch gears here. I want to talk a little bit about tax reforms. There's a lot of let's say hubbub going on right now. You have the Lawyers Association of Armenia that's protesting against this, but essentially some small businesses were taking advantage of the ADZE laws, right, for small businesses, where they're paying a 5% turnover tax, and now the government is essentially going to be reforming and doubling the tax to 10%, and they actually eventually want to just move to a 20% VAT model. Now, as you know, that's my primary focus of interest, and I think this would be absolutely disastrous for small businesses, and I think more specifically in terms of, remote workers, freelancers, so all the ancillary services around the high tech, because of course the high tech industry is theoretically going to be shielded by this. They still will have the 0% tax, which is great. But the way the Armenian government understands high tech, you're a programmer, and that's pretty much this really narrow thing. They're not understanding that for a high tech business to survive, you need copywriters, you need graphic designers, you need, marketing specialists, you need sales professionals, and so on. And essentially, I'm afraid that what's going to happen is we might as well just put a sign at Zvartnots that says, "Welcome to Armenia, enjoy the tourism. If you want to do high-tech business, welcome to Georgia. Your next flight is we're competing with a country next door that has a 1% tax." So that's my my worry. Assuage my fears here, please. Tell me we're not going backwards.
I believe we're not. Let me break down the tax changes into 2 parts. First changes refer to the taking certain sectors that have been eligible to work under the simplified tax regimes out of this list of activities. And as you mentioned, the legal advisory, for example, or the lawyers, is one of those groups that are now not allowed to work under the simplified tax regime of turnover tax or sales tax of 5%. They need to work under the general scheme of VAT, which is 20%. The second part of the tax law reform refers to the changes in the base rates and in the potential rates of the turnover tax or sales tax. How it works, the base rate before, for example, for the trade, it was 5%.
Yeah.
But it allowed for the write-offs when you have certain expenses. For example, if you import the product and then you resell it and you have the invoice, this is your base for the write-off of the expense. And they allowed for the write-offs for the expenses to be incurred and to lower your base rate from 5% to 1.5% before. Mm-hmm. The same went for the catering and restaurants and horeca. Right now, what the proposal is and what was adopted in the parliament is the following, that we increase the base rate twice, but we allow for you to continue to document the expenses. And if you document all your expenses and you have the write-offs, you can lower it not to 1.5%, but even lower, to 1%. So it basically, the ideology is that in case you document all your expenses, then your taxes will be even lower than it was before.
So it's encouraging transparency then.
If you don't document all those expenses and you move with the base rate, it might be twice as big if you don't document anything. For you do all your activities without documenting anything, without documenting any of the expenses, and without any write-offs. The idea from our talks with the Ministry of Finance, with the Ministry of Economy, the idea that we got from them is that we're moving in the direction of helping people, motivating people to document all their expenses, and through this format to lower their potential tax rate. Of course, it has certain abstentions, because there are certain sectors where you simply don't have much of the expenses to document.
Knowledge workers, for example.
For example, if you are in the consultancy business and you simply provide services, or if you are a guide in the tourist sector, obviously you don't have much of the expenses to document. So automatically, it will be very hard for you to reach to this lower tax rate. Yep. But there are some areas that this will be very much applicable to, like for the manufacturing sector, like for the trade, for many other, for the guest houses. So I think there was a discrepancy in that matter. Mm-hmm. It could have been adjusted in a better way to include the sectors that are less sensitive to those type of expense write-offs, and then to disentangle it into two parts, basically, and not to throw the same regulation on all the sectors. But it's important to see what is the philosophy behind this. This explanation we do understand, but we need to go back to the philosophy of creation of the sales tax regime and of the simplified tax regimes. And the philosophy back then was very simple. We create a simplified tax regime, and we're saying that this is a tax regime that will not require you to do much of the documentation or paperwork. It's a simplified tax regime. Otherwise, you would go to the VAT tax regime where you need to document everything, when you can get your VAT back, etc. So in a way, we come very close in terms of paperwork to what the general tax scheme is. And that's where the philosophy, in my understanding, collapses. If we're saying that this is a simplified tax regime, that this offers us a bit higher rates, but offers instead less paperwork, and then you basically put it as the prerequisite for your lower taxes, for you to do the documentation, it ruins the philosophy. Yep. I'm not saying that it will not be a good motivation, because we saw before that when it comes to lowering the taxes through the documentation of the expenses, we saw how it worked quite well for the trade and for the restaurants. But again, if we are frank with the consumers, with the businesses, with the people, it will simply be to say that, this is our way to move to one tax scheme, which is a general tax scheme of VAT.
Yeah, but are there going to be
in the long run?
Are they planning like any exemptions for knowledge workers? Like again, if right now 5% of our GDP is the high tech industry, and that includes all the ancillary services around it, but the stated purpose is for it to eventually become 20% of our GDP. We've already lost about 20,000 Russians who have left either to Georgia or onward. In Georgia, you pay 1% tax if you're making around 150,000 US dollars. You can file through an app, whereas here I need an accountant that costs me 30,000 dram per month, even if it's a single invoice. I just find it baffling that instead of our stated goal of being, in the top 5 countries in terms of ease of doing business, we're pretty much telling freelancers and knowledge workers that, well, go somewhere else.
Well, for the IT sector, the tax rate is kept at the same level, so it's 5%.
But the freelancers around them is what I'm worried about.
It's very important when we say IT. It very much depends on when you are registering as the business, what code of activity you use. So nothing really precludes the freelancers or the marketing or the copywriters to use the code of IT when they are registered, because they're pretty much providing the service of marketing in the IT sector.
But that's a gray area. My accountant she offered, do you want to do the zero tax? I said, no, it's 5%. It's not the end of the world. And I'm contributing to the army. So I went that way.
What I know for now is that the Ministry of High Tech is currently discussing the draft law for the support to the IT, and this will not be kind of a format where you prolong it 1 year by another year and then another year.
Should be enshrined.
But a general regulation for the very long run perspective. This is at the moment on the agenda, and I believe that by the end of the year we'll have the kind of the final package available.
Yeah, I just find and part of it is communication around it as well, right? Like, we don't know. So there's a lot of my friends who are wondering, should they just leave? Armenians, not Russians or not Indians or foreigners doing IT. They're just going, if I'm going to pay 10% in Yerevan or 9% in Belgrade or 9% in Barcelona, listen, I love living here, but after a while, you lose the competitive edge, and that's what sucks, and we need to understand that. We can't just assume. This is something I think the Armenian government hasn't quite figured out yet, that the world is small. So this whole attitude of, well, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? It's like, well, Merry Christmas. They're going to get up and they're going to go. And, when they're making 5,000 a month as IT people, they can go. They've got choices. So
from what I see during the sessions, during SME Development Council sessions, during Investment Council meetings, is that they perfectly understand this and they're trying to find a way. But there are different stakeholders also across different ministries that try to look it through their perspective, through the tax collection perspective, through the tax policy perspective. But
so just say it's the finance ministry, man. We know who's responsible. Just say it's the finance ministry.
But I believe a balanced approach will be in place by the end of the year.
I hope so.
I wouldn't say much at the moment, but
I hope so.
Let's wait and see.
I really hope so. I think this country has so much potential, but we need to make a consistent move towards. Yes, I understand it means a little bit less upfront, but these IT people, they're literally subsidizing. I mean, look, you mentioned cafes and restaurants, right? Like, you can't build an advanced economy on cafes and restaurants. The Nakhkins tried this, and of course, we all saw how well that worked out. But however, these guys are all in business because you have this new middle class of Armenians that have showed up essentially in the last 5 years, something that was just, that didn't exist before, and they're paying. All of our burgeoning wine industry. Who do you think is drinking that, right? You see vodka consumption, right? So you got to keep these people happy. You got to keep these people earning money because they're paying for all the other stuff that is employing other Armenians that then goes into the tax pool. So anyway. I know I'm preaching to the converted here. Let's talk about construction. It's something that's been on my mind. I'm a little bit wondering what's going on. On the one hand, I'm happy that there's a bunch of new modern buildings springing up, and that means that the cost, the prices will have a tendency to go down, despite the fact that right now, a brand new condo in central Yerevan is $5,000 US per square meter. I think eventually when they come online, the prices will go down, but it seems rather excessive. Like, there's just crazy construction absolutely everywhere. Is this 2008 Kocharian style construction bubble that's artificially pumping up GDP numbers, or is this something real? Is there real funding behind this? Is there real demand for this? What's going on here?
Again, let me disentangle it in two parts.
Sure.
First, it's very interesting that on one hand we see a lot of construction, but when you talk with the construction companies, they all predict a crisis coming up soon.
Okay.
Or that they are already in the crisis. This comes from two facts. First, obviously the mortgage assistance scheme which allows for your personal income tax to be basically paid to the mortgage payments, and they cancel each other out basically. In most of the cases, especially for the IT workers or for the banking and finance sector. And we know that this will be out from January 1st.
They're removing the system.
Yes, in Yerevan, this will be out from January 1st. And in the regions, if I'm not mistaken, up until 2029.
Okay.
So we already see kind of the transition from Yerevan to closer regions. If you go out of Yerevan in Gervesh or Zorakhpur or in Echmiadzin, which are formally out of Yerevan but very close to Yerevan in Abovyan, you see a lot of new construction going on.
Qatar, Zovuni, Ashtarak, you're seeing new constructions everywhere.
And what they're saying is that we basically put in place a system that has accelerated a lot the construction sector, and that has motivated people who otherwise wouldn't even think about the mortgage to enter the market. There are a portion, to my estimation, around 20-25% of all these people are the ones who consider this as an investment. They invest in the smaller size apartments to then rent it out. But there are a lot of, the biggest chunk is actually those who are workers with higher than average salaries, for whom it is a saving mechanism to, you know, to have their payments down from already paid taxes, and then to have their own apartment.
And then we get a China-style, you know, construction crisis where people are just using these properties as essentially a replacement for a bank, and then it all goes
yes,
south.
I mean, when you look again, we enter a new a new paradigm of where we like to invest and how Armenians invest. If you look at the deposit rate in Armenia, it's one of the highest in the world per capita. We have money. On average, the check, in our estimation, per person is from $100,000 to $150,000. But since we don't have much of the kind of understandable and easy instruments to invest in, we either do the deposit at a rate of 9-10%.
Term deposit.
Now they've started to do a lot of also purchase of the governmental bonds because it's tax-free, and it's 10-11%. And the other one is the, you know, an easy operation. I get an apartment, I rent it out. When you speak of a harder operations in terms of the investments, that's where you lose people, because they need kind of a guarantee that this will be the case, that they have the money and they get the money. And the kind of the iteration between one to another is very short and very easy, from A to B. So our assessment is that at the moment, and we talked on this with the construction firms to understand how many new construction permits are applied for right now. Not the construction permits that they applied before and they receive now and they do the construction. But what is their kind of appetite or motivation at the moment to do more? We see that it's near zero.
Oh, so we're seeing like a tapering off now of the demand.
Yes, for the new ones. Because we will not see this for 5 years at least, because there are construction permits they have been applied for 1 year ago and they received their construction permits. And now they are pretty much implementing the project. So it will take another 5-6 years. So this type of boom you'll see in the upcoming 5-6 years.
So Yerevan will be less dusty as a result then. We'll have cleaner air finally.
We'll see. I mean, at the moment, to my knowledge, the municipality is working towards the creation of the general plan for Yerevan. Something that we've been missing for around 30 years. To be able to understand where we allow the construction, where we don't allow the construction. If we allow the construction here, should we also account for new roads or new schools or new infrastructure? Because you see what's going on in the center. There are a lot of buildings creating in the area, in the very small center. Of course, it has been stopped mostly in the past 2 years, but still. And these are all in very dense areas.
And in bugs, you'll have brand new condos.
I can't really imagine what the traffic will be like when those buildings are in full completion. So this is what we see. On the other hand, we see a lot of construction going on in Tsahkazor, in Dilijan, in the format of apart hotels.
Yeah.
We see a lot of construction going on, not in terms of the residential buildings, but in terms of factories, for example. So there was this type of a switch in this period. And even the construction companies that we talk with, some of them, not all of them, they are saying that we started the construction back in 10 years because we had the capital and we wanted something to utilize to get the gain very fast.
Yeah.
But now they are switching to agriculture, for example, or they're investing in tourism. So they moved out all their capital from the withdrawal their capital from the construction into other sectors. And they focus mainly on the agriculture because at the moment there are many assistance programs in that regard for the intensive orchards, for the smart farms, for the high-tech greenhouses where the government is paying around 50% of the construction costs. And this is an area that is of interest to them. So we see this interesting transition and flow of the capital from one area to another as of now.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, you're just seeing these massive projects springing up. I mean, you have like defense housing is the big one that I'm thinking of here, but it's like a residential neighborhood for 45,000 people. Like, is there really that kind of demand? And the other fear, of course, is that a lot of these projects will be half built and then kind of left to rot. And you're seeing tons of I mean, I'm in Avan, I won't say what neighborhood, but you're seeing like, there's a boom, but you also have tons of half-finished houses. You had like a townhouse project that when we moved in, they were working on it in December, and then they stopped for Christmas. They never came back. So there's a trash heap facing our backyard window, and it's construction materials, and it's just sitting there. And it's been, we're now in July. It's been 7 months. So it's just kind of strange to know to wonder like what's going to come of all of this. Is there going to be a concerted effort to make sure that these are all up to code, up to regulations and so on, or are we going to have like on our highways just abandoned half-built shells of houses, which is embarrassing to tourists and so on?
During the past year, the municipality has adopted several very stringent regulations on the unfinished buildings and has increased the fine for those type of cases by a very large margin. But we need to be very careful here to understand why they are not finished. Is it because the construction company is not responsible enough? Is it because of his liquidity, of cash flow, or there are other issues here? The quick research and analysis shows that it usually falls into the last category. Yeah,
they run out of money.
No, that's not what I mean. They do have money. They want to proceed. But when it comes to the receiving the access to water, access to gas, electricity, the paperwork, we see that, for example, the gas connection is not done within 1 year or 1.5 years, or even 2 years. The same with water, the same with electricity. Electricity is the easiest one.
Yeah.
So what they're saying is that don't punish us for the public services operators not doing their job properly.
Yeah.
And there is no way to to push these processes to be faster because they're independent bodies.
But can't we fine the utility companies or maintain some kind of strict
there is a
30-day period or something?
There is a committee on oversight of the public services, but it's not there to fine. It's there to more kind of oversee the operations. So we see this, closed vicious circle that, the municipality might consider this to be the issue that, you're not responsible enough, you don't do your work through the planned timeline. But then the construction firms, they voice a very legitimate concern that, it's not late because it's our fault or we don't do our job properly. It's because we've applied 1.5 years ago to receive the gas connection and we're still in the process.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hope that this is resolved sooner rather than later.
It seems to be resolving. for the past several months, we try to monitor all these issues and to have our eyes on it. It seems to be bettering the situation for the past several months, but we'll see how it goes.
Okay. Let's finish on a positive note. Hovsep, what would you say is one of the biggest victories you guys have had recently? What's a reform that you guys have pushed through that you're proud of, or a reform that you have pushed that has borne fruit that you're proud of?
Most of our reforms, when we managed to push those through, we're very much proud of. But I will mention one of the very recent ones, which is a SAFE agreement, Simplified Agreement for Future Equity, which is something that is in the US legislation for the IT startups to get the investments from different investment funds, VCs, etc. And when we're looking at the legislation in Armenia, this wasn't available in Armenia. So now in the Armenian legislation, and Armenian legislation is one of the few ones in the broader Eurasia region, where you have the SAFE agreement, very similar to the US regulations when it comes to IT startup investments, embedded in the Armenian legislation, adopted by the Parliament of Armenia around 1 month ago.
Nice. Congrats. I'm happy to hear that.
Thank you.
Anything that's pro-business, I'm happy to hear that.
Thank you very much.
Hovsep Patvakanyan, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick.
Thanks again for watching CivilNet.